So a very, very warm welcome to you all tonight. Thank you for coming. What an amazing venue. Absolutely gorgeous to have you all here tonight. My name's Amanda Sinclair and I am a professorial fellow at the business school. And I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you tonight and to share with you our wonderful guest speaker, Jane Hardlicker, who I'm very much looking forward to hearing from. It is a very important event, and I've been at the business school a really embarrassingly long time. It's absolutely wonderful to be here, though, at this event, because it has a very, very special place in my heart. And the other person who helped to create this event 23 years ago, Catherine Walter, is also here. So thank you, Cathy, for being here and for... So we certainly felt many years ago that there was an important opportunity and a place to support women who were a minority in the business school, to help them to develop networks, to share issues, to raise the profile of women. And that first dinner that we held was in Carlton, a little gathering in Carlton. And from then it's gone from strength to strength. But it's always such a wonderful event. It has such a lovely feel to it, and I very much hope that you'll enjoy this evening's proceedings and just have a marvellous time. So I'm just really the warm-up act, but I would like to thought I'd share some of the experience that I've had over the last little while. I tried to clear a bit of a space in my diary late last year to write a new book, and it's taken me a while to get up the impetus to write another book. But I've been doing a lot of very, very interesting work around mindfulness and leadership for probably about the last 8 or 9 years. And I know mindfulness is very flavour of the sort of month, and for good reason. But the work that we've been doing about putting mindfulness at the heart of leadership, I think, is really leading edge work. But I wanted to share a particular side of this research with you. I've been having just such a wonderful time with it. It's been such a pleasure and a delight to go and meet lots of leaders and do lots of work with leaders around mindfulness, and to see how, in particular, and this is what I wanted to just sort of focus on a little bit tonight, women are doing leadership in ways that contribute to the flourishing of others. Women are doing leadership in ways that empower others, where they thrive themselves, but also develop and enjoy the leadership work. And, in an environment where so often we're thinking about the obstacles and the difficulties of leadership, I've just found it quite thrilling myself to be exploring some of these other examples. So I thought I'd just give you a couple of tastes of this. There is a myth that mindfulness is about the head, that it's about what goes on up here. But actually, to be mindful, we actually need to be in our bodies. We need to bring our whole self. We need to draw on our senses, our breath, as part of being mindful. So as we begin tonight, I'm just going to ask you to really come into the room. Take a few big deep breaths. Nice long exhales. Just allow the body to be relaxed. Yep? Nice big breath and enjoy. So what I want to invite you to do really is be present here. You know, one of the things that we know from studying mindfulness is that often our thinking, you know, our tendency, and this is sort of heresy in an MBA context, isn't it? There's a tendency to, you know, let the thinking mind be dominant. And what I'm suggesting to you is that mindfulness tells us that sometimes it's really important to allow the thinking mind to subside and just be aware of this wonderful present moment. That's the invitation, to be fully here. Nothing else to do right now, nothing else to worry about, no phone calls to make, no emails to respond to, just being here. Feeling good? Yeah? Feeling relaxed? Good. Right. So, a couple of examples. I had the pleasure about a year ago, or over the last few years really, of working on a really remarkable research project called Women in Leadership in a Century of Australian Democracy. Absolutely fabulous project where I was working with historians and all sorts of people across disciplines. And one of the purposes of that research was to show the amazing research, the amazing leadership that women had done over that century of Australian democracy that was often not labelled as leadership. You know, often regarded as volunteering or community work or given other labels, but in fact it was about leadership. And you know, one of the greatest examples of that, and I don't know if you've come across this marvellous book by a woman called Claire Wright, who's a La Trobe academic, called The Forgotten Rebels of Eureka. It actually won the Stella Prize last year. And it's a marvellous book. I recommend it to you. Both a scholarly work and a very readable book, which puts back into the history of the birthplace of Australian democracy, that is the Eureka Stockade, puts back all of the women who led important aspects of those events. And you know, these were amazing women. They were, because of the structure of the goldfields, social norms were being loosened, and because so many of the men were involved in mining, you know, it was the women who ran the businesses. It was the women who ran the newspaper. It was the women who organised. You know, so it was women doing all of these amazing, all of this political activism that supported those events. So that's one example of how women can thrive and contribute to very, very significant social change. Another very different example that I want to share with you is some work that I've done with correctional officers. And this particular piece of work is with female correctional officers. And, you know, I was asked to work with them around mindfulness. I think that the first act of leadership here was the head of HR for the prisons actually saw that women could contribute something really powerful to the correctional system, but that they currently weren't being allowed to contribute. You know, very, very hierarchical, very, very masculine system of leadership in corrections. And so she said, well, you know, maybe Amanda, you could come in and work with the women. And I've got to tell you, you know, this was a tough group. You know, I walked in on day one and they were like this. They were almost as tough as some of the EMBAs. But it was an amazing experience working with them. And although they, at the start, they certainly didn't see what they were doing as leadership, that's exactly what they were involved in. You know, they are part of trying to lead a big change from, you know, correctional systems as focused on incarceration to rehabilitation. They're trying to work on endemic corruption. They're trying to work on a whole range of fronts and still have faith and optimism in human nature. You know, still model that kind of optimism about the capacity for change. Absolutely extraordinary leadership. And they also taught me quite a lot about how to thrive in such a difficult environment. I remember saying at the start, you know, that part of working authentically is sometimes around dropping your armour, you know, bringing your whole self to the job. And this particular woman, she was shorter than me, so she's pretty small. She looked me in the eye and she said, "If I took my armour off, I wouldn't survive." And she meant that literally. It turned out, though, that she was underestimating herself, because it emerged as we were talking about how they stay strong and empowered in their roles. She was the most senior level in one of the martial arts in Australia. So she really had a lot of backup if things got tough. The third example I'd like to share with you is a very different sector, and this is around women leading the arts. And this is a relatively recent sort of area that I've started to explore, and it's just been amazing to find out and hear from and do research on women who are involved in leading the arts, and in particular some of the women leading regional galleries. Now, some of you may already know about some of these women, but the best known perhaps is a woman called Quinlan, who is CEO of the Bendigo Art Gallery. Now, leading art galleries is another, you know, fairly traditional sort of stuffy area. You know, there's a lot of blokes there and they guard it fairly tightly, and they have what I would call a fairly conservative, sort of painterly view of what's art. Well, I mean, have any of you been to any of the Bendigo exhibitions? They're amazing. You know, Karen has really just helped to really push and be bold in this space about what constitutes art. So she's done exhibitions like exhibitions of Grace Kelly's as a style icon. She's done a wedding dress exhibition. She's done an exhibition on the body beautiful. She's done a wonderful exhibition which was several hundred years of underwear. Absolutely fantastic. So really repositioning what's art. By any measure, by any conventional business measure, Karen has been astoundingly successful, you know, in terms of audience numbers, in terms of support, in terms of international profile. She's been incredibly successful. So another woman, you know, not being bound by the constraints, not allowing some of those obstacles to hold her back. The fourth person I'd just like to briefly mention is Dale Fisher. And those of you who were at the dinner, not last year but the year before, Dale was one of our guests. I interviewed her as part of the dinner. Dale is currently CEO of the Peter Mac Hospital. And before that, for around 9 years, I think, she was head of the Women's Hospital. And again, those of you who've ever come across her, she's bold, she's out there, she says what she thinks, but she ends up having an enormous sort of following because she's so passionate about public health. She's passionate about women's health. And, you know, she doesn't worry too much if she ruffles a few feathers in doing that. You know, I think she's an absolutely amazing role model, and somebody who I've worked with quite a lot over the years and learnt a great deal from. You know, one of the other things that she did at the Women's was to introduce concepts like developing the brand. Yeah? A fascinating sort of idea that no other hospital CEO that I've ever come across had ever thought about. But she's done a lot of work on some of those things. You can imagine, you know, certainly when she first went to the women's, and also even more so the Peter Mac, because it's such an iconic institution, that there were quite a few feathers ruffled. But one of the things she's shown me is that, you know, often powerful and important change, you need to do that. You need to do that. It's part of what you're there for. It's part of what you're there for, and she's shown me how to thrive through that, how to not be contained by it. I mean, you know, remarkably, one of the many things she's done as part of her Peter Mac work is to sort of start to set up an international institutional collaboration between cancer research institutions. Fascinatingly, that hadn't been done before. So, some fabulous, fabulous examples of women thriving leadership. And I want to sort of draw it together around this sort of notion of mindfulness, because you know, there's a marvellous quote that comes from a historian. Oh no, I think the quote's just going to leave me. It's just going to go off into the yeah, it's gone. It's something about... No, I've got it. Well-behaved women never made history, is the quote. So, you know, part of my message to you is around this idea of being your whole self and bringing your whole self to the work, not being bound. So let me just draw it together with a few points. I think there are lots of lessons, lots of really valuable lessons that can be learned about how we can bring presence and pleasure into leadership work. And we need to learn those lessons, right? You know, leadership is not about inflicting suffering. It mustn't be about that. It mustn't be about that. Life is short, and people's well-being matters. And so as leaders, we're, you know, really interested in helping them be as wonderful and live as wonderful lives as they can be. So just a couple of things that I want to sort of underline as part of that. I mean, I think the examples that I've given, and there, of course there are many, many more that I could offer, show that this sort of path to leadership is about being wholly present. It is about not feeling as though one has to conform to templates of leadership in order to do the work. And, you know, somebody like Dale or Karen, they're disruptive, they're challenging, they're controversial. And that's a very important part of what they're doing. They're also bringing their whole self. So, you know, particularly in the case of Karen, what I see is somebody whose natural creativity, whose natural openness, whose ingenuity, whose perseverance, whose flair, you know, they're just all part of it. They're what you get as part of that leadership, and that's absolutely wonderful, wonderful to see. The third thing that I'd say is that what I see from these women is that they do take the time to step back, to make sure that what's important is their work is directed and their energies are directed to what's important for them. They make sure that they nourish themselves and their teams. And in all of those cases, you know, what you see is those women bringing up, saying, you know, there's somebody who's got talent, there's somebody with some great ideas. How can I get some obstacles away from them and really let them thrive? That's part of what they're trying to do with their leadership. So I'm going to finish just by getting you to think about a bit of audience participation. So I want you to think about a woman who's inspired you, whose leadership has inspired you. And she might be, she might be a family member. She might be a, somebody you've worked with in the past. She might be a friend, or she might be anything at all. But I want you to just think about what it is that's made her leadership so inspiring for you. And in a moment, I'll just ask you to have a bit of a conversation with the person sitting next to you about what it is that really has inspired you about her. Just in finishing, I'll give the example of my mother-in-law, because she really does inspire me. She's turning 95 in a few weeks. She's had a lot of tragedy, as anybody of that age is often encountered, but a lot of very tragic things happen to her. But she remains open and listening and appreciative. She has organised a bridge competition at the retirement house where, the place that she lives, and she absolutely whips the opposition. She's fended off approaches from a younger man. He's 83 and, So, just how cool is that? How cool is that? I just think it's absolutely a fantastic model. So have a little conversation, just for a few minutes, about a woman in your life, a leader, and tell your partner why she's inspired you. Off you go.